TheMesh.tv, an online network of original free audio and video shows based out of Western North Carolina, reaching the entire world. Listen and watch through iTunes or through the website TheMesh.tv.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's show. This is the RealTailgate.com College Football Hangout, a Google Hangout sponsored by Smithfield's Chicken and Barbecue. I'm your host, Big J. Waldo. Ben Swain is in the producer's chair, and Talking Moose Media has our back on the technical side. You can join us every Wednesday live at 9:30 p.m. as Ben, myself, and a rotating set of panelists discuss college football in North Carolina. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Smithfield's Chicken and Barbecue, and they wanted me to remind you it's just not a tailgate without the barbecue. Log on to RealTailgate.com for special offers, a list of locations, archived editions of this hangout, and download the RealTailgate.com College Football Podcast. This week, we have our producer, Big Ben Swain, gentle Ben Swain, from the Walk-Ons. We have Brian Barber from Tar Heel Blog, Dimitri Ravanos from the RealTailgate.com College Football Podcast, James Curl from RiddickandReynolds.com, Mike Maniscalco. Was that right, Mike?
That is dead on, Jay. Well done.
Mike is the host of the morning show on 99.9 The Fan and 680 AM The Buzz. Is that right?
No, that'd be 6:20 a.m. The Buzz.
Thank
you for trying.
I'm a horrible typist. I don't know how I got the 8 and 2 confused.
And as Ben Swain would tell you, I'm really just Mark Thomas's handler. That's really it.
Tonight we also have Rashid Lee from the RealTailgate.com College Football Podcast, Shane Ryan from Grantland, and rounding out a complete lineup is Sean Crest from Bottom of the Pile Podcast. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
So far, so good.
James Curl, you look very nice tonight. You have a great background. I see you're responding to your fans' input on Twitter.
Yes, I am. I'm coming to you live from Willow Springs.
Yes.
Willow Springs is one of the largest cities in North Carolina, isn't it?
It is. We just built a new opera house, which we're
Land
very proud
area.
of.
Right. Everybody doing all right? We got a couple of new faces, Mike and Brian. Glad to have you. Rashim, have you been on a show yet?
I have not been on the live show. I was on the test run, the 2-hour test run.
Oh, that's right.
I took a couple of weeks off.
Our unseen pilot.
Well, as you might guess from our conversation, it's rather a dead week in college football in North Carolina. However, our producer and panelists have come up with some great topics for conversation. This first one, I'm going to ask for some help from our producer to actually explain what he's talking about. But generally, we're going to discuss a comment that Dana Holgerson, the coach for West Virginia, made. Basically, why should East Carolina be fighting for the same prize as North Carolina? This is part of a conversation about super divisions, and I don't want to butcher Ben's thoughts, so Ben, elucidate this topic a little further.
I'm not even sure that's a word there, Jay. But,
Ben, I'm used to that every morning, so let's just go with it.
We are on
allow me to elucidate.
Illuminate?
So Dana Holgerson made the comments essentially using East Carolina and North Carolina as an example, but the general topic of conversation is in college football is their haves and their have-nots. And those haves and have-nots play by the same set of rules handed down by the NCAA. And there's a lot of conversation about should the football schools or the elite programs break away from the NCAA, or should there be a fourth level of college football where those schools get together and make their own decisions. So that's essentially what he's talking about. But I'm glad he used our example because we can bring that into our own state. And, essentially the question is, are schools like a Duke, an ECU, a Wake Forest, are they holding back programs like NC State in North Carolina that have a lot of resources compared to schools that don't have a lot of resources. Should they play by the same set of rules? Should there be an extra division of college football? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first things for me, I was happy that Dana actually made it to the dog track window and got his drink in on time to get the comments out. That was a big thing for me. But, I mean, I think this is – college football's had haves and have-nots all along. Even if you have a super conference or a super division, there's going to be haves and have-nots. Alabama and Texas and Oklahoma and Notre Dame are going to have more than West Virginia and whoever else we put at the bottom of the pile, be it Syracuse or Pittsburgh or whoever is in there. So you're still going to have teams at the bottom, and you're not going to hear the super teams talk about, oh, well, West Virginia's taking money and food out of the mouths of the Alabama training table if that happens. So I know what Holgerson's trying to say, and I think he used ECU and Marshall as the examples because those are two of the schools that his fan base knows. So that's what they brought out. And I think he just tried to make some point because they're feeling all pretty high and mighty being in the Big 12 right now. But I don't necessarily agree with that because you're always going to have haves and have-nots. So if that's the case, West Virginia, why are you scheduling 1AA schools or the lower rung? Why don't you play your non-conference of every tough game and boost the money if that's what you want to do? So I have a big problem with what Holgerson had to say because college football has had this for a while, and West Virginia shouldn't be the torchbearer for the school that says we need to eradicate and break away.
Yeah,
I agree with Mike. I don't agree with his opinion of what he said, but I think that West Virginia is the wrong school to say it. I agree with Holgerson in the sense that there are haves and have-nots, and that divide is getting bigger every year. So to put the teams at the top, who have the revenue and the resources to succeed, whether it be maybe win a national title or just compete against those guys, I don't have any problem with that.
I think Mike hit on something really interesting there, which was, if West Virginia is really concerned about this, why do they schedule 1AA teams and the teams that they consider the have-nots? And I think it illustrates how much the haves actually need the have-nots. Because if you go to a super division, how interesting is it going to be if, let's say, every member of the SEC has to play each other? You'd have one 9-3 team and a bunch of 6-6 teams, and then how super is your super division? I will say, though, it's interesting coming from West Virginia because I would argue, why does West Virginia get to play for the same prize as Alabama, Clemson, Texas, and schools like that?
It was very generous of you to throw Clemson in there.
Well, this kind of touches on what we talked about last week with, North Carolina schools all fighting for the same recruiting pie. I mean, Duke and Wake and App State are going to, and ECU are going to take a few players that might have wound up at State or Carolina. But I don't know that, you can point to that as the reason why, the State and Carolina, the larger state schools, aren't breaking through to the next level.
Well, can I just say, as a North Carolina resident, I resent it when the northerner, like Dana Holgerson from West Virginia, gets into our business and tries to tell us, sorry, we don't need you. We're just fine down here, Dana. But one thing I do want to bring up, as a Duke fan, a Duke football fan, I would love if there was a lower division Duke could be in because I just think it would make it a lot more fun. It would arguably make Duke competitive in terms of championships. I mean, how do you guys feel? You guys who also root for, Wake Forest, Duke-type schools that probably will never be competitive with NC State or UNC in a long-term basis.
Well, that's the thing. We said that we asked in the original question whether Duke and Wake were holding back the bigger schools, and I think it's kind of the other way around. I don't think anybody's arguing that they're holding them back. I think it's that they just can't compete at this level, and so I think that a second division will benefit the smaller schools that can't afford to pay players or whatever rules changes they end up making at that super division level. I don't see how Wake, how Duke, or how any of the 1AA schools that they play are holding back any of the big programs.
And to piggyback on what Sean just said, and James, kind of to disagree with what you said for a half second, how many bowl games do Carolina or State go to if they don't have 2 wins every year against Duke and Wake Forest in their conference?
I would love to play Duke more than once every 6 years. But that's just personal preference on my part.
No, but I mean the point of it is you need to have those teams in your conference who you can beat, who are at the bottom of the conference. So and that's that's why Vanderbilt's in the SEC. Let's not kid ourselves. Yeah, the GPA, but I mean, there's always going to be, no matter how you split this off, there's always going to be some schools that have more than other schools, and it's I know what Holgerson was trying to drive at, but I don't think because ECU and Marshall are Division I is why West Virginia their players are going without right now. And really, what are they going without? I mean, we can talk about reform and what should be out there, but I don't think that's the reason why there's some problems with college football, because you have ECU having to play by the same rules as West Virginia when it comes to how you treat your football players.
I think as flawed as it is, the bowl system allows there to be different divisions in college football right now. You know, as a Duke or as a Wake, the goal is get to 6 wins so you can go to a bowl game, and it's like you've made the postseason, and then it's a big success. The problem is not these smaller schools holding back the West Virginias of the world. The problem is the West Virginia fan base and programs at that caliber expecting to compete at the top echelon, and who's holding them back is Alabama. I mean, let's be honest. What Holgerson wants in terms of being able to pay the full cost of scholarship and to be able to pay stipends to his players, he's still not going to steal players from Alabama. I mean, are you going to go to Alabama or are you going to go to West Virginia? So that's not going to solve the problem that he's talking about. I think it was Rasheem that mentioned maybe the right message, but certainly the wrong school that's saying it. You're not going to hear in Alabama talking about it because they're already winning at this level.
Well, I think there was one national college state made the point this week that the rich are always going to be rich. I mean, doing something different isn't going to change the fact that Texas and Alabama, everyone's going to still get the top recruits because you want to go and play in front of 80, 90,000 people and not, in West Virginia.
Yep.
It's a lovely state. I've been skiing there one time.
And but to that point, and Rasheem stole my point. I just wanted to get that out here on the podcast. With that, look at what Oregon and what Alabama built. Nobody's stopping West Virginia from building those facilities, are they? I mean, ECU isn't. Did that stop Oregon from building the nicest luxury hotel on the West Coast for their football team?
Let me ask you a question. If we go to a fourth super division, right, and someone, and the rules say you have to provide money for 3 meals a day for your players at a small living stipend, whether it's everyone gets the same or freshmen get this, sophomore, so on and so forth, who's more likely to bust their ass to get to that point? Is it someone in the lower tier of a quote-unquote power conference, or is it a school like a Boise State or ECU that has so much of their identity wrapped up in football?
Well, you have to ask yourself, does a school like Boise State really have the resources to do it? I mean, yeah, they've had some success football-wise, but has it been enough success to spend that money?
Well, they don't have a T. Boone Pickens.
No, but they do have a blue field.
But if we talk about dividing up the money amongst these schools, then all of a sudden that is the incentive for them to do what Dimitri just brought out, which is for ECU and for Boise State. Yeah, all right, we're all in. All of our money is going to go to football. We're going to make sure that we give our coaching staff the best. I mean, I think that's one of the points that does get made here, that a school like ECU is more apt to put more into their football program than Duke or Wake Forest or Vanderbilt.
Well, I mean, doesn't Alabama pretty much operate that way now? I mean, they have other sports and they have some success in other sports, but it's all football there, and that's where all the money is going to go. And you're never going to have a great coach basketball there, because who wants to be in the shadow of Nick Saban's football team? It's the reverse problem of Mac Brown at Carolina in the 90s. I mean, he's going to go to Texas because Texas, they're talking about spring practice instead of Texas in the Final Four.
Fair enough. We ready to move on? Does anybody have anything left on this?
I don't think so. Just that you're handsome, Jay Waldo.
I just want to move to a bigger division so we can get ball players rental cars. I mean, we're already doing that.
I'd rather pay for the car than the parking tickets.
Oh boy.
The Tailgate Special from Smithfield's Chicken and Barbecue. It's 8 pieces of chicken, a pint of barbecue, any 2 sides, 2 dozen hush puppies, and a whole gallon of tea. Just go to realtailgate.com for details, coupons, and a list of locations that open early on game day.
All right, so the next topic is, with the addition of Pitt and Syracuse this year, the ACC chose to fit the new schools within the current divisional structure, and that keeps NC State and Wake in the Atlantic and UNC and Duke in the Coastal. With the protected crossover opponent, Duke gets to play Wake every year and UNC gets to play NC State every year, but should the ACC realign geographically to ensure that all 4 schools play each other each season?
Well, the problem there is the state of North Carolina. I mean, you would have one of those schools, probably Wake, would be forced into a northern division while the other 3 are in a southern division.
No, I think, aren't we saying that we keep all of the Big 4 together within one division? Or
well, I think if you're asking the ACC, they're not considering those 4 the Big 4.
Well, as we all know,
Dimitri, were you counting ECU as one of the 4?
North Carolina schools, right?
Yeah. Oh, did I say ECU? I meant Wake.
I don't think they should realign, though. While it would be great for the fans here, I mean, why should the schools here benefit from playing against lower division teams all the time, as Wake and Duke typically are?
Yeah, I'm not sure that North Carolina schools care enough to make a change like that. I mean, if you're talking about realigning the divisions so the Big 4 gets to play each other on a yearly basis, I mean, James mentioned that he'd like to see Duke and State play more often. It'd be great, but they don't now, and honestly, it's exciting when they play, but it's not like when they don't, I'm just bummed for the entire year that I'm being robbed of a Duke State showdown.
But is it exciting when they play, or is it exciting when...
So, you know, I'm not eager to face Cutcliffe anytime soon. So,
yeah, well, see, that's the point. I mean, is it exciting when they play, or is it exciting when Duke wins that game?
Well, I don't know.
It's exciting when Duke wins that game.
Yeah, I agree.
Otherwise, I think the result's pretty much expected.
I think if you look back at the Duke State series, there's always been close games, even during the Phillip Rivers era when arguably we were at our best. You know, there were several games that came down to the wire. So, yeah, I don't know that we've been kicking in Duke's teeth for 3 decades or whatnot. I think, I don't know. As a State fan, I would put that Duke series on a more consistent basis than it is currently. But I think if you lump all the Big 4 together in this new ACC realignment, it's certainly not going to help the perception that the ACC is North Carolina centric. You know, I think that's a gripe that a lot of the schools that are north and south of the Carolinas always complain about. It's the fact that Swofford in the ACC is only looking out for the Big 4, and particularly the schools here in the Triangle. And I think keeping those 4 together would only, enforce that idea.
But we got to get past that. I mean, I understand holding on to things forever is a big thing of Southern, holding on to the Southern culture there, but leave that in the past, man.
How dare you?
I know, but leave it in the past.
Shane, you want to take this one?
With this northern aggression and arrogance.
How dare I? But
somebody.
I'm going to do the regime route here. I'm going to agree with Rasheem's point, but disagree with why he said it. The reason why I wouldn't want to put, if I'm the North Carolina schools, why I would want to put all 4 in the same division is because you're then limiting the opportunity for the North Carolina schools to win the conference. Because if you put everybody in one division, you only got one shot at getting to a championship game. Where if you split them up, the state at least has 2 opportunities to get to the championship game. Not that they've done it since it's been separated, but if you put everybody in the Atlantic or the Coastal, well, the only school from North Carolina that can represent you be the ACC champion is coming from that one division. You would never get a State versus Carolina opportunity to win the conference. They would have to, without a doubt, come out of that division. So that's the other reason why I would keep them separated. I know it's the romantic idea, and James, I think it comes from the fact that it was like that forever, and it was the old basketball mentality too. If everybody plays everybody, that was exciting. But I mean, we're going on. That's almost 15 years ago when that happened. So you just got to move on.
But Mike, in terms of actually having a North Carolina champion, doesn't it actually increase the chances if they're all in one division? Because then you have 4 in one division, so the odds of them getting a team into the championship game are over 50%.
No, but if we do it by geography, Shane, they're going to come in 3rd behind Clemson, Miami, and Florida State.
Sure, because they're with the Southern schools, right?
Yeah,
that's why we have to stack the basketball teams in one division. That way, Duke, Carolina have a fighting chance, right?
So I'm kind of disappointed in all of you. Actually, I'll be honest about that, because nobody's mentioned the one thing that even matters here, and that is putting attractive matchups on television. right? I mean, it's all about TV broadcasts. It's all about being nationally relevant. And
well, in order to put attractive broadcasts and games on television, we would have to move outside of the ACC, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I'd watch Florida State, Virginia Tech. I mean, I watch Clemson, Florida State. When Louisville comes in, I'm excited about seeing Louisville play against Florida State. There are games that are nationally relevant. Duke, North Carolina, even UNC, NC State. No one cares about that game outside of the state of North Carolina. No one cares about that game.
And no one cared about Pitt Syracuse when they were in the Big East. Nobody. I mean, so it is about TV. The only way, Ben, you want to make this nationally relevant, get Notre Dame in here because their games are nationally relevant every week. Make it happen. Do what you have to do.
I'm working on it, man.
I know.
I'm trying.
I think
he's got a direct line with the Pope, so he's giving it.
Yes, I do. So.
I do think schools would like the idea of having geographical divisions because, for non-revenue sports, it would cut down on some of the travel costs. I mean, Miami's always going to have to fly pretty much anywhere they go. I mean, their next closest school is still several hundred miles away. But, if you have teams that are in, at least somewhat regionally clustered divisions, you're going to have programs that don't have to travel as far to get to their games, be it in soccer, volleyball, any of those things like that. I think university presidents and the people who have to balance these travel budgets for these schools would love the idea of a geographical division.
I think football coaches would hate it, especially like a guy like Frank Beamer, because you're telling him you can't go into Miami and have a presence down there.
Yep.
This is we got to think about the recruiting angle as well.
And you guys are talking geography. We're talking geography right now, but we have an official cartographer with us. So shouldn't we be deferring to Brian on this one?
Yes, Brian. Where should we look at on the maps behind you?
And what is your globe set to?
Set in North America, man.
Quick, run to the map and point to all the ACC schools.
Yeah, I can do
it. I'm just not going to show you guys.
Do I count Notre Dame? That's Notre Dame's in Indiana, right?
Indiana.
That would be your second slurred answer was.
If you get Notre Dame, that's
Notre Dame in Chicago, right?
Pretty much.
Tammy Hansborough knows what it is. You can ask Tammy about it.
Come on, Shane.
All right, we got 7 minutes left.
It's flying. Time flies when you're having fun, folks.
It does.
Time flies when you're in Australia in front of the city.
It does.
What time is it there?
What time is it there? Saturday?
Oh, the sun is up. It's great. It's
Give
10
me the
a.m.
GMT time.
James can't wait for that big New Zealand versus, Perth rugby match coming up.
Oh, Australian rules football all day, man. Forget rugby.
Okay, so this season, East Carolina plays both Carolina and State. Which is the bigger rivalry game, and why?
Well, I think, James, you'll know this better than me, but I think that East Carolina wants to beat State more than North Carolina because I think East Carolina looks at State the way that State looks at North Carolina. So that when that week comes around, because State just hammers ECU fans about, you're not in our conference, you are what you are. I just think that ECU fans, from the fan standpoint, I think that the State game is much better and much bigger for their fan base.
I agree with that, and I think because it just remember when ECU had to play a game up here in State and they pretty much destroyed the stadium. I think that alone makes it better than the Carolina ECU rivalry.
Yeah, I think the past history between the two schools with the property destruction, I think, adds a level of animosity there that it goes beyond just simply, our way of life versus yours. Mike, there is definitely a food chain, I think, of sorts. Carolina looks down on State, State looks down on ECU, and then ECU's, I guess, looking down at App State, maybe. I don't know, but that. Pembroke, Campbell. But I do think I don't want to discount though the ECU UNC game though, because I do think that there is a where I think State and Carolina has some State and ECU has a history with rumbles in the stands and whatnot. I think the ECU culture and the UNC culture are further divided than they are at State and ECU, and I think there's a level of we want to stick it to these hoity-toity from Chapel Hill that adds a level of animosity that's different, but perhaps on the same plane as the state ECU rivalry.
No, see, I think when your neighbor who has the exact same stuff as you do thinks they're better than you just want to beat them every day. I think that's it. And I think that's why, James, I think you're right. The divide is there. But I think that ECU views themselves on par with State, and State just doesn't see that at all. And they shouldn't. State is in front of ECU. Sorry for the ECU fans who are out there, but that's just the facts.
Yeah,
it's kind of like if you're in like medieval times and there's a castle and there's a team from people inside the castle and then there's outside the castle two groups of peasants. If you're one group of peasants, you have to see those other peasants every day. Do you want to beat them, or do you have like the culture clash where you want to beat the castle team?
We just had a Game of Thrones reference by Shane Ryan, and that is so well.
I actually, when he said if we're talking about medieval times,
Game of Thrones, Mike.
Does your medieval times have Pepsi?
That was actually the question I had when he said if we're talking about medieval times. I thought he meant the restaurant.
Wait a minute, you don't have silverware, but you have Pepsi?
Yeah.
Here, eat this bird.
Carolina.
yeah. I'll be honest. The ECU game scares Carolina fans to death for this reason, and on my blog we call it.
They're going to be in Chapel Hill.
Well, no, not that. Well, not that. We call it the Kobayashi Maru game because it's a no-win scenario. Beating them doesn't really get us anything. Losing to them is like, oh dear God, we lost to ECU.
Kobayashi Maru is your globe of one of the Romulan planets?
Wasn't that the name
Klingons.
That was from The Usual Suspects, right?
I like Shane's reference a lot better than Brian's. Just can I go on record?
Oh, Rathacon, man, come on.
I think about 4 years ago, the UNC ECU, if you want to call it a rivalry, took an interesting turn when UNC decided they needed to up their admission standards, and suddenly there are multiple classes of kids that never thought ECU was going to be on their radar about to receive degrees from ECU. So I think that may have upped it, and in the future that rivalry might mean something. But for right now, you're right. It all goes back to the history. There's not been a history of arrests, at least a consistent history of arrests, outside of UNC ECU games the way there have been outside of ECU state games.
Is that one of those degrees behind you, Dimitri, the ECU one that you thought you were going to get from UNC?
We covered this last week, Mike.
Yeah, those are always.
Hey, I'm new to the party, James. Be nice to the special guest.
You got to keep up, man. Keep up.
Well, I think what it comes down to is that ECU fans are UNC basketball fans during basketball season.
This is true. I know one. This is absolutely true.
Yep.
And maybe from a UNC perspective, because I think the value of an ECU degree is a little bit higher than UNC at the moment because of recent news. But
at least in African American studies.
Exactly. I think that ECU NC State game is like the battle of the rednecks,
And blue collar.
It's like
the Civil War if the North wasn't involved.
Thank you, Shane. It's the Hatfields versus McCoys.
I like that Shane keeps piping in for the South. Brother, I appreciate it.
No problem, man.
As a North Carolina resident, he feels he has to.
Right. You're going to have to show off your Robert E. Lee belt buckle at some point.
True story. I did have the horn, the Dixie horn from. This is absolutely true. When I was in high school, in my Oldsmobile, I had the General Lee horn.
I don't know. I think it's definitely a big game, but I think if you gave State and Carolina their druthers, both schools I think would prefer not to play East Carolina. There's been a lot of animosity. Due to the fact that a lot of legislators have kind of mandated that these schools face one another on a consistent basis. I'm sure we would have faced each other probably semi-regularly, but I know that after everything that happened back in, I think it was '86, and then as Rasheem mentioned, when they tore down the stadium against the Miami, I think given our choices, we would probably prefer not to play East Carolina. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I think most State fans would prefer not to play East Carolina.
What about the Peach Bowl? What was it, the Peach Bowl in '92?
Jeff Blake.
They kicked the field goal and win at the end.
That's painful memories, man.
Can't have a discussion with an East Carolina fan without hearing about the Peach Bowl. And it could be about history or, you know.
You can still see the pain of that loss in James's face. That's the tough part.
That's just how it looks normally, Mike. I don't know what you're trying to say.
I'm saying I was actually saying you're a beautiful man, James, and then anguish set in. So
thank you.
Got weird, didn't it?
It did. I don't know where I'm squirming.
All right. Well, I'm
Jay
wrap
Waldo,
it
next
up
topic.
here. You guys, thank you very much to all of our guests for joining us this week. Thanks to the folks at Talking Moose Media. Special thanks to our sponsor, Smithfield Chicken and Barbecue. I want to remind you all, it's just not a tailgate without the barbecue. Make sure you check out realtailgate.com. Get the college football podcast there, all the other information you might need. You can also get the podcast on mesh.tv or iTunes. I'm your host, Jay Waldo. Our producer, Ben Swain. We'll all be here next week to see you again. Thanks.
The Tailgate Special from Smithfield's Chicken and Barbecue. It's 8 pieces of chicken, a pint of barbecue, any 2 sides, 24 hush puppies, and a whole gallon of tea. Just go to realtailgate.com for details, coupons, and a list of locations that open early on game day.
The Mesh.tv, an online network of original free audio and video shows based out of Western North Carolina, reaching the entire world. Listen and watch through iTunes or through the website themesh.tv.